Start the recording. There we go. All right. Well, I hope you guys made it through week 2 well, and you've kind of figured out a routine and stuff. The good news is that chapter 2, especially for chapter 2 for this class, was really kind of the first deep dive into material. And so you probably found that it was a little bit more than a review from what you learned in Animal Science 101 or your introductory to animal science class. And so that's going to be kind of the theme for every single chapter that we continue to work through, is going to be deep dives. And a lot of that information is going to be pretty detailed. And so I would just continue to encourage you to keep in mind that this is a junior level class, a 300 level class. And so we're leveling up on the amount of knowledge that we need to know. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. We'll go through a couple of announcements. We'll look at Blackboard together, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what is coming up. And then we'll switch gears and do some poll everywhere questions, so I can kind of get a feeling for how you guys are interacting with the material. All right. Wrong. There we go. Okay, so just a couple of quick announcements for this week. So we are officially in week 3 of the material, and this class is nice because the chapters for the most part line up with where we're at. And so we will be studying chapter 3 this week, which is male reproduction and anatomy. And so this week, on Friday by end of day, you'll have a self-study due, which is I'll show you what it looks like here in just a second, but it's actually a document that you can download or print off, type in answers for whatever you need to do there, and then scan it, save it as a PDF, and re-upload it to turn it in. And so this week you do not have a quiz due, you just have the self-study due. And the self-study will actually require you to know information from chapter 2 and chapter 3. And so this class continues to build on itself. So every single week, the majority of the questions or the assignment is going to focus on a lot of what was presented in chapter 3, with the realization that you could have to pull concepts from previous chapters that you learned. All right, so again, that self-study is going to be due this Friday, the 12th, by end of day, or 11:59 p.m. So let me just show you where everything is at on Blackboard. All right, so we're going to continue to work out of this Start Here module. And in that module, you'll see material opened up for week 3. And in week 3, you have the weekly briefing that also goes out in an email on Fridays with information about the Zoom session, as well as the due date for the self-study. And then there's a folder in here with some additional resources. So if you guys are get through the material, you've read the book, and you still don't quite comprehend what is happening, there is a lot of really good other resources that we have brought in for this class or for this chapter here. And so those resources can be found in this folder. There's some good videos to watch put together by Dr. Parrish from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And so you can actually watch, so the dissection of bovine testes, There's also some information in here from the female chapter as well. And so with anatomy of the cow, etc. So this is just a folder. It's available to you if you want some additional resources. All right. You'll also find in this week 3 folder the note guide for chapter 3 as well. Again, it's partial notes. It was created with the intention that you guys could download it and fill in the different areas, or print it off and fill in the areas that were missing on that folder or on that document. And then there's a series of lecture videos as well. So all about chapter 3. I think there's 6 of them here. And so just be cognizant of that. You've got about an hour and 20 minutes worth of lectures to get through as well. And then down here at the bottom is that self-study. And so the self-study is not a quiz. It's actually an assignment that you can download. And as soon as it comes up here, I'll show you what it looks like if you haven't got a chance to look at it. All right, so we've got some anatomical structures and ID points here where you can go in and write in the different anatomical structures, both on the female side, answer some questions as well. This is another way to make sure that you guys are comprehending the material. You'll see in this class, we're going to use a combination of quizzes on Blackboard and these type of assignments. So it's my experience that different students have different learning types. And so I'm trying to capture as much of that diversity with different assignments. And then part 2 is all about the male, which is why you need to actually work through the videos and stuff this week first. And so you can go in and identify the different anatomical structures in the male. You'll write those in on this 4th page over here. Here's your word bank of what we're looking for. And then there's some additional anatomy to actually go through and make sure you understand, as well as a series of questions. And so once you get all of that done, you can write these in with a pen. You can download it if you guys are tablet savvy, like I want to be and am not. You can write it in and save it with a stylet. You can type it in, whatever you need to do. And so the one thing that I did have quite a few problems with last semester when we did this type of assignment is people that took pictures and then uploaded the pictures. And so I'm going to encourage you to not do that. So we really need it in a PDF document. All right, so that is what is going on this week. So any questions before we switch gears and do some poll everywhere questions? Everybody clear with what is due on Friday? You guys can give me a thumbs up, or you could talk to me too. Okay, great. All right. All right, so let's switch gears over to poll everywhere. And you guys should have received another, if you aren't already registered, you should have received another email from me this past week. And I'm also going to give you like the website that you can submit answers to, as well as a text bank as well. All right, so let me go back here. All right, so we are activated. So our first question, gosh, there's so many things going on here, is how are you feeling about your comprehension of the female anatomy material? So chapter 2, how are you feeling about chapter 2? And so we can where in the heck is all of the, hang on. All right, so if you guys want to submit to the website, it's polleverywhere.com/KCDatley001. Or you can text message as well. And I've never done the text messaging, so, but it says, just put in my username, which is KCDatley001, and the number is 37607. And you can select A, B, C, or D. There we go. All right, we'll take 30 more seconds here, guys. All right. So it's looking like the majority of you guys are really feeling pretty comfortable with chapter 2 material, which is great. And what brings my heart even more joy is nobody is selecting D. So that's good. If you guys were the few people that were kind of in that C category, you got through the quiz, but you really don't understand the concepts, that is really where we may need to change strategies a little bit. So again, my suggestion was to make sure that you are reading the chapter, listening to the lectures, doing the note guide, and then studying before you take the quiz or do the self-study. And so my gut feeling is that you're going to feel a little bit better after you get through the self-study this week, because that's another way to look at and kind of comprehend that female anatomy material. But as always, if you are having difficulty grasping these concepts, please let me know so we can set up a meeting through Zoom or just on the phone. If you don't want to jump in during my normal office hours, which was this morning and on Thursdays. So, but for the most part, it looks like you guys at least are comfortable with it, which is great. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and lock in those responses. And let's go to the next question here. All right, so again, this is based on last week's material. So which of the structures on the ovary produces large amounts of progesterone when dominant? There we go. Slowly figuring this out. Okay. All right, so we'll take another minute. Just another 15 seconds. All right. Let's lock this in. Okay, cool. So excellent, excellent. So this is a little bit of a detail question. So which of the structure on the ovary produces large amounts of progesterone when dominant? So the correct answer here was in fact B, corpus luteum. And so a corpus luteum is going to form after a corpus hemorrhagicum. And so a corpus hemorrhagicum is going to be that very first structure that forms after the oocyte has ovulated on the ovary. And the reason that it's called a corpus hemorrhagicum is because there's a lot of busted blood vessels there. So it actually looks very, very bloody. And so hemorrhagicum means blood body. And so for about the first 5 days after ovulation, sometimes longer, it will actually have a really dark appearance because of the presence of a bunch of those busted blood vessels. The corpus hemorrhagicum will start producing small amounts of progesterone, but the question here was asking for large amounts. And so that's the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is going to be the structure on the ovary that is going to be made up, which we'll learn later, of small and large luteal cells. And their whole entire purpose is to produce progesterone. And progesterone is going to target tissues like the uterine tissue and the cervical tissue and the hypothalamus. And it at each one of those locations, it has a different result. And so we'll talk more in depth about those when we get to chapter 5, 6, and 7. All right, so good job, guys. Let's go ahead and do the next one. And we'll enable that. All right. So which of the following structures produces large amounts of estrogen when dominant? And so we'll take a minute here as well. It's about 20 more seconds. Okay, let's get those answers submitted if you haven't done so already. We'll go ahead and lock in the responses and let's look at where we're at. Okay, so we've got the majority of you guys are selecting the antrum follicle, which is correct. So the follicle is going to be a structure on the ovary that contains the germ plasma, so the egg, which is carrying the DNA of the female, along with several cell types. And we'll get into the cell types a little bit later. But those cells are actually going to be producing large amounts of estrogen when they during its entire time on the ovary. So as it's selected, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more cells inside the follicle. It's producing more and more and more estrogen. And so when that follicle becomes dominant on the ovary, the follicle is cranking out massive amounts of estrogen. And that becomes important because it's actually estrogen that will feed back to the hypothalamus and cause a cascade of events that will eventually lead to ovulation. And so follicles are going to produce large amounts of estrogen. Corpus luteums, when dominant, are going to produce large amounts of progesterone. And both of those hormones have very different effects on its target tissues. So keep in mind that the area where the hormone is actually secreted is what we call the source tissue. And the area that the hormone has an effect on something or changes a physiological mechanism, like for example, when progesterone binds to its receptors in the cervix will start producing a really thick, kind of nasty mucus that will basically lock down the cervix. And so it does that so bacteria can't get in. It also does it so that the embryo, if it's successfully fertilized, can't get out of the uterus. And so we're going to spend lots of time throughout the semester talking about sources of hormones and effects of hormones on their target tissues. And so this is just a good way to kind of start thinking through some of these concepts. So my last kind of check-in question for you guys, it's not a poll everywhere question, but one of the ways that you can make sure that you're doing a good job getting a handle on this material is if you were a sperm cell and you were dropped somewhere in the reproductive system of a female, could you find your way to the oviduct for ovulation? Okay, so do you have a good handle on those anatomical structures? Do you know the pathway that sperm cells will follow to get to the oviduct? And keep in mind too that the sperm cell will never, ever, ever get to the ovary. Okay, so the ovary will ovulate a mature egg. That egg will be caught by the infundibulum and it will be funneled down to the infundibulum to the ampullate isthmus junction of the oviduct. And that's where fertilization takes place. So I say that because there's always some confusion, especially with one of the questions that is going to be on the self-study. People or individuals always or sometimes think that the sperm cell goes clear to the ovary, and that's not true. It stops at the oviduct. All right, so that for the most part, I think you guys are pretty comfortable with the chapter 2 material. The hormone stuff is always what I ask, because if you can master the hormone stuff, you've got everything else in my mind. And so that's why I ask those questions specifically about the hormone or about the hormones. So let's just do a quick check-in and let me know what questions you guys have about the chapter 2 material or just the class in general. And then I have one kind of last fun thing to share with you before we get out of here. So what questions do you have? All righty. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears then and show you the last kind of cool article that a colleague of mine sent today about some new research that was just published. And this new research actually has to do with devious sperm cells. So this might make more sense when we get to chapter 10, but it's kind of cool to just talk about right now. And so there are researchers that, German researchers that work at an institute in Berlin that just published this manuscript in the National Academy of Sciences that really identified a gene, a sperm cell gene, so a haplotype, not a diploid, that kind of poisons other sperm cells, forcing them to swim in circles until they die. And so I thought that this was really interesting. And so I'll put this in as a web link on this week's material as well. But since we're talking about male anatomy and sperm production and stuff, it really fit quite nicely. And so what these researchers found is that there's a gene that is going to be turned on to produce messenger RNA and then a protein that is going to cause other sperm cells to, or that's going to produce something that causes other sperm cells to basically swim in circles until they die. And so this is, again, another example of the greedy sperm cells, or the ones that finish first and get to the fertilization point. And so it's kind of cool the way that they are detecting this. So they're using a lot of electron micrographs to identify not only the gene that is involved with this process, but how it is actually affecting these sperm cells. And so this is just an image with a sperm cell here labeled as T. This is a normal sperm cell that has the favorable genotype. And you can see that it is still kind of in a normal configuration, and it is headed to the follicle to actually fuse and start the fertilization process. But here is one of the sperm's contemporaries, or his buddies, that was affected by whatever protein was produced here, and he basically turned into a circle and is swimming in circles, and he'll never have a chance to actually get into the follicle and do the the fertilization process. And so this publication, again, was published just recently in National Academy of Science. And so even though they were doing a bunch of this research with in mice, which is one of the best model species out there, a lot of these things have implications in livestock species and in humans as well. And so it's very cool. So just don't think that once that DNA gets packaged into a sperm cell, which we're going to learn all about in chapter 10, that it just sits there. That DNA is active as well. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because we were talking about the beginning of male anatomy, and we'll probably come back to this when we get to chapter 10 as well. So. All right. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Yeah, sperm cells are very much go big or go home. I told my colleague that the old adage is true: nothing is fair in love and war. So, and that's both love and war. So, all right. I'm happy to hang out and answer questions for you guys if you have them. If not, I will plan on seeing you next Monday. Please don't forget your self-study is due this Friday by end of day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.